What's up, my healthy friends? It's you, me, and another whiz-bang amazing conversation that hopefully reduces your overwhelm and moves you to action, making that actual change that needs to occur. Which, if you're ready to do, guess what? It's the year to do it. Because in 2023, it's my mission to coach 500 people to stop the binge eating and savage self-talk cycle so they can lose weight whilst feeling in control and without restriction along the way. And if you want to be one of those 500 people and you want to permanently deal with your emotional binge or overeating cycles, then scroll down to the show notes below and click the link to inquire about my programs. I'd love to be there with you along the journey, but it is a very tricky journey to navigate on your own. And so if you want some of that accountability and some of that emotional support, scroll down to the show notes, click the link, and then let's walk the path together, basically. Now, today's guest comes along with some pretty sweet street cred from the big dog, Craig Harper, over at the U Project. I want you to meet UNNA Goldsworthy, whom is an exercise scientist with a master's degree in exercise rehab, with work experience in hospitals and research teams on various levels. And to quote Craig Harper directly from a conversation we had over a coffee not too long ago, UNNA is the body whisperer. That's a pretty profound testimonial. She's been in the space for over 20 years and is developing what she does to involve the mind and the nervous system as an imperative piece of the health and disease management conversation. And, you know, if you listen to these episodes regularly, I absolutely love talking about the mindset and beliefs and the way we think in the context of our health. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Anna. How are you?
Hi, Matty. I'll have to pay Craig for his very generous. Yeah, a whisperer. I love that. It's a little bit creepy,
whisperer.
But yeah, it's a little bit. Yeah. I'll take it.
I remember when we caught up and he was saying, "Oh, you know, Anna's going to send you an email and you've got to catch up with her." He was like, she can just look at you and know what's wrong with you, like the way you're holding yourself. She just can figure it out.
I think that'll come a little bit too from I was sitting at one of his talks and I was right at the back. I was huddling away because I had my little one with me at the time. And he'd recently hurt his back and I was looking at him and we'd done a bit of work on me before and I was looking at him and I was like, one of his tibias was just the weirdest position. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what we're working on next. Woo, that'll impact your back. Wow.
So and we were talking about this before we hit record, you have a breadth of experience and you work in a bunch of different areas. So maybe just to give some context, what are you all about? What do you do? And then we'll take it from there.
Okay. All right. What am I about? I think for listeners to make sense, because we always think of like exercise as a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
So from that physical point of view, it really is why the left, not the right. So when people come with things that are challenging them in performance or there's a movement pattern that's not quite right, being able to delve into what's made up this person's biomechanics from day dot to the day that you're standing in front of me, and being able to assess that and then integrate things that just don't match back into movement patterns and get things moving a little bit more smoothly. And that comes down to really, what we were built for, like understanding gait really amazingly and being able to integrate and manipulate that to support someone doing better. So from that biomechanics, musculoskeletal point of view, that's part of it. But then ultimately when we're meeting people, we really should be also listening out for what else is in that story that's going to impact how well the body's going to accept change from a nervous system point of view. Where are they at with their mindset, with committing to long-term change? Also, I think the fitness industry has really bullied some bodies around where like we need to be doing a certain thing or it has to happen in a certain time schedule, but it's when we're really committing to what does a healthy body feel like, look like, act like for me over all the years of my life as I go through these critical windows and across my lifespan? What's my mind telling me that gets in the way of all of that? So, yeah, taking on one human at a time, and then that really tricky thing of how do we compartmentalize that and then deliver it to a room of people and make it meaningful to, as a speaker, many people in a room. So, yeah, it's constant refining and dodging and getting to know people's stories, but yeah, it's good work.
There's so many things in there that I'm like, oh, I want to go down that rabbit hole and that rabbit hole and that rabbit hole. But you mentioned in there like, how our body operates across the different stages of life and in different chapters, and but also understanding what our bodies were designed to do. Now, I can imagine, you've probably seen, and maybe the listeners have seen too, that evolution graphic where it's like got the monkeys and they're bent down, and then that goes up to the standing human, and then the last one is like a hunched over person at a desk. And so, how were our bodies meant to move? Because I feel like everything we're doing is the opposite of how our bodies were designed to move and function, and we don't move them anywhere near enough. We don't stand up straight. We don't walk in bare feet like anymore. We've got these shoes. We're walking on these random shapes all day. Like, what's going on in that space of what we were actually designed for versus where we are now?
I feel like we need a sociologist on board as well to kind of wrap it up. Like, where does the industrial era come into it?
Yeah.
I had this amazing a tutor back in the day, and they pulled this idea in that sits with me, like different generations in history where we would move differently. So after war, the Great Depression, and that the physical actual presentations of our postures and our bodies representing sociologically what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming out of war, and dances that are coming through cultures like the twist and the hula hoop, like when we finally started freeing up the waist. Like, I'm no expert at it, but that kind of pops into my mind with those kinds of questions, like, where are we at, and how is what's going on in our really zoomed out version of a lens impacting our bodies. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot to say in terms of like posture, and even in your world with nutrition and how food's accepted by the gut and all those kinds of things, where we might get really rigid with this idea about posture. But I think we also need to look at how someone is emotionally and how that is represented in their posture.
Mm-hmm.
And then, is that something that's been there chronically? And then how have organs, or the impact of how we've developed over time, created a signature in the way that we move or the way we carry ourselves. And then, pregnancy, for example, we've got this kind of huge change, like talk about squished up insides. And then, once we've got that baby, earth side, our identity changing, our posture, the demands on us. So I think it's really interesting when we look at posture and that kind of idea of not just looking for it to look a certain way, but really being able to get down to the nitty gritty, because we can have people with their heads on top of their bodies, but they're still in pain. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so what can't move to allow that to be adaptable versus, needing to be particularly upright. But definitely a big fan of the squishing shoes, feet into shoes conversation. I'm a bit of a foot nut. Like, what do we need to make sure is moving in the foot so that it ripples through the body? Or what
do you think about barefoot shoes?
Barefoot shoes, I think, like most commercial things, got very exciting for people very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think it's settling into something that's really valuable for people now, where we're looking at the breadth of the forefoot in the shoe, and that toes are able to get in there and move, that we've got the opportunity to, I guess, feel the ground more. But I don't think we can excuse that we're also still on concrete most of the time, or hard surfaces. Yeah. So we might be cruising around, and then, we've got these barefoot shoes on. So in theory, we're getting great spread, but is our body able to accept the shock forces that we're sending through them? So I think barefoot shoes are a real evolution from the production point of view. So if you've gone from a really solid shoe to cruising through into a barefoot shoe, mm-hmm. it can be an actual purchase journey.
Yeah.
That your foot and your body should be going through that journey as well with you, to make sure that you've got that mobility in your body as well as in your foot. And then that's where posture gets represented, right? Like, if I can be adaptable in my posture, mm-hmm. represent my emotions, but then come back into a center. I kind of like thinking of it as a spectrum, like your posture on your emotion spectrum, as well as when we can glide either way and adapt our body with our emotions, mm-hmm. but always be able to come back to the center. But we need to be able to, slide in both directions. But feet are amazing. We don't care for them enough. being able to connect with them as well. Like they just get shoved in shoes. And I wear a high heel here and there, but I just know what to do to take my foot out of the high heel and bring it back to the ground, what movements to do.
Yeah, I did a heap of, I've done lots of sport in my life, but I was doing a lot of running when I was at uni. I was living with the strength and conditioning coach of the Geelong Cats, so an Australian, elite football team. And like everyone was hyper fit. So I just became a part of the culture, except they were a few years older than me and had plenty of money. And I was a broke uni student. I was doing so much running with them in just absolutely knackered shoes. And we did this one like race, maybe half marathon, or maybe it was 12 or 15. I don't know what it was. But after that day, I basically had daily foot pain for the rest of my life. And I tried so many things. And this was before I was, sort of de-indoctrinated out of the Western medical thinking into where I am now. I was very much like medicine and, got to go to the podiatrist and I tried all of these different things. And it wasn't until I purchased Barefoot shoes and even running around the hospital all day. So I was still very much in the hospital. It was I probably began this journey about 8 years ago. And I read that I needed to spend about 6 months slowly working my way into the Barefoot shoes. So I do my normal work shoes for 4 days a week, then 1 day at the hospital, and then I'd go to 2 days. And I did that over 6 months. And basically no foot pain after about a year once I'd been in Barefoot shoes, even on the concrete, even on everything.
Love it.
And then I got Barefoot runners as well. And they have different padding that you can buy. You can buy a bit, it's a little bit more padding in there, but being able to have that spread. And I had sore calves and sore knees and stuff for a little while, but I also saw a chiropractor at the same time that was a specialist in Barefoot shoes, and she helped my hips and stuff. And it's been transformative getting the footwear. And now when I do squish my feet into dress shoes so that I, don't look like, a weirdo in a suit, I pay the price for 2 or 3 days, because the Barefoot feels so natural to me.
It's pretty wild. I squeezed my shoes into some acceptable corporate shoes the other day and had to walk through the city, and my hips were just talking to me the whole time. They were like, ooh, ow, ooh, ow, ooh, ow. And it really is that, how is our body prepared to take these ground reaction forces that we're dealing with? And that was really interesting. And I think the other thing is that they were slipperier.
Right.
But it's same as you. I feel that difference because I spend most of my day with no shoes on and, working with my feet in particular ways to make sure that they're as healthy as possible. We've got as many joints in our feet as we do as our spine, and we're obsessed with the spine. Got lower back pain, or focus on the spine. But, what else is this body telling me? Where, there's a saying, he who chases pain is lost. It's like, okay, this is where we're feeling it, but we're, other than being hit in the back with, a baseball bat or something, it's probably coming from some other place in your body. And that's what you want your therapist to be able to nut out, problem solve the human jigsaw puzzle.
Well, that's one of the issues that I found when I was hunting around, because I eventually just surrendered to the fact that I'll have sore feet for the rest of my life, because I also grew up in this typical Australian culture of people just, their bodies hurt. It's just a thing, as you age. And I wasn't old, I was 20s, but you're surrounded by these people that are just like, you get old, you get fat, you get sore. And it just is. So I just also surrendered to that fact until I sort of, took it into my own hands, which is often the conversation we hear in the health space of people, waking up to nutrition or waking up to different alternative medicines because they had to take it into their own hands. And everyone that I'd ever seen, nobody talked to me about my entire posterior chain. They just focused on my feet. And it's like, but it's all connected. And it's just like the idea that doctors, or some doctors, don't really give nutrition any credence at all. And it's like, hang on, it doesn't just go into your stomach. Those molecules go into every cell in your body, right? And so it's the same with the posterior chain, which leads into the posture, conversation, and all the way up the body, not just the feet and the ankles.
Yeah, all those chains. How do they interact? How do they make sure that when we move, it massages our stomach, that we breathe, it massages our stomach and pulls on our spinal cord to, massage our brain, like, what's the interaction in all of those places. It's funny though, the rules that we have, like you get sore or don't complain, or gain pain, all those kinds of ideas. And that, but it really is bothersome when we just forego or give up our vitality because, movement's a young person's thing. It's like, no. We just have to figure out where you're at, start where you're at, and build as we can and we need to. And also just finding those holes, like what's missing in the holistic story of your life. Where are your stress levels at? Are you seeing Matty for your nutrition? Are you
hopefully?
Yeah. Are you, where's your mindset at? And how's that represented in your body? Because I think the other thing that's important for people is sometimes exercise isn't the answer, or their understanding of what exercise looks like isn't the answer. So being able to come to someone that can help assess the body, help assess their total, load of what's going on in every system in their body, and then pull apart what's the best place to start. You might want to be here, but this is where we need to start and build from, and see how your body responds in the systems that are important to us, rather than it being about body shape is actually your outcome, a mental health outcome, and then we'll choose tools that are appropriate for that. Mm-hmm. So we stop comparing ourselves to everyone else, this person's doing this, or maybe I should be doing more, or maybe I should be doing less, or there's never less though. Everyone feels like they should be doing more.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I like the word movement too, because I often get people to reframe their goals around movement, because it's usually, I have to do this strenuous, sweaty, hardcore exercise, and if I don't do that, then I didn't achieve the goal. And it's like, no, let's just take it back a few notches and just make the goal movement, which includes a walk around the block, includes yoga, includes stretching. And then, it's not like, as you said before, an individual's definition of what exercise should be might not be the tool they actually need.
Yeah, and just even checking in with what's my body saying to me that it needs. Like, we've got movement as an option, as you said right at the very start, just actually getting out of your chair. Just shapes are really valuable, I think, as a word to give to people. It's like, okay, every 45 minutes, just aim to change the shape that you're in. So if you've been sitting, stand. If you've been standing, go for a walk. If you've been walking, sit down. Like, just making it simple. Just that lovely idea that our muscles don't know their labels. They just know that they need to be stimulated and they need to be moved. Mm-hmm. And that's how we get these amazing impacts in all the other systems in our body. That, same as nutrition, that medicinal impact of moving, and figure out what's right for you at the moment, not sort of pulling yourself into the future where you're not really at.
You mentioned a few times, or alluded to the emotional aspect of how one holds themselves, or the way that things show up in the body. Can you just talk to that area too? Because I think, in my mind, that conversation makes me think of things like acupuncture and kinesiology and energy medicine and all of those kind of, ideas that, we can feel our feelings in really specific locations that result in physical pain, or result in, even disease situations in some contexts.
Yeah, I guess there's the logical things about, dispersing pain, moods. Like, some people might be in a mood and they choose to go for a walk and all those kinds of things, which is interesting because I guess from an acceptance and commitment therapy point of view, we would also pause and go, okay, are we avoiding a feeling by doing that? Mm-hmm. Are we just trying to get rid of it when it actually comes up often, and we need to be mindful of how workable that feeling is, or the action that's preceded that feeling, how workable that thing is, and can we adapt that into a more workable behaviour that then means we're not just in the same loop with avoidance and things like that.
Yeah,
I think people's readiness to change, or willingness to change in terms of, approaching movement as well, like sensations in their body that might not feel like they're accepting of. So we might think of people that have had major changes in their body. So someone with MS or a stroke, and that there's a grief going on about things that are lost, or actual tactile or physical challenges where, I like the idea of being healthier, but the overwhelming feeling of these sensations in my body that just make me sad, or that I just want to avoid that feeling of my body not being exactly what I want it to be, and dealing with that grieving process. I think as well, I think that big bit is about being clear about where those feelings are as well. So in ACT, we'll be able to, the plan is to figure out what's the biggest problem and how does that stop us from being healthy, and how can we give tools that will allow us to be aware of those things and strategize away from them. So, the urge to stay at the computer, and then the conversation is all about how we've got bloating and discomfort, or we've got pain, and it's okay, so what's contributing to that? And it really comes down to, I don't see my family. I'm overcommitted in my work. I'm busy, and I've got this, label for myself that is mind-blowingly strong to me in my identity. And how do I, get in touch with that? That's not actually workable. And then how do we put those feelings and embody them and see where they actually present themselves in your body? So stress levels that present as chronic pain, actual, I guess yogis would talk about the solar plexus, or acupuncture with not just the solar plexus, sorry, all of
the meridians.
All of those meridians in the body, exactly. And that these, where are they? What color are they? And can we diffuse them and choose a more meaningful action that matters to you, that helps us to not get in this place again? So it's not trying to get rid of feelings, but it's going, hey, these feelings are there for a reason, and what's the workable and unworkable behaviours around them? I think that's a real pin for people, is we go on fitness trends and, all that kind of stuff, but how do we truly commit to being healthy, whether it's with nutrition or movement or whatever, sleep? How do we commit to doing what we say we would like, rather than having this huge gap between our intentions and our behaviours?
I'm curious as well. Literally every time you talk, I'm like, oh, there's so much I want to talk about. It's amazing. But in regards to that emotional stuff, often with the idea that emotions are stored in particular places in the body, it makes me think of acupuncture. And it's funny that you use the word pin as well, because, many people talk about the experience of having a big emotional release when they get acupuncture, or even in yoga. And the hip hinge movement in yoga is really known, particularly for women. And depending on the conversation you have, some people think it's like because that really triggers the area of the womb and that part of the reproductive part of their body. And so there's a lot of emotional release that happens for women, particularly in that particular position. But what do you think is going on there in context of, it goes in and out of the woo woo, this kind of conversation, and then into the physical, and then back out to the woo woo. But how do you think that idea exists in the physical nervous system in specific locations?
I think it can be definitely personal. I think there's archetypes, and I don't feel like I can compartmentalize them effectively. I'm not a full trauma informed practitioner, but certainly when I'm going through this process of getting to know someone's body, we're literally mapping things out. So what's happened here in your feet, what's happened in your ankles, has there been anything that's happened to your body that wasn't your choice? Has there anything been put in you or taken out of you? So surgeries and things, scars, and the amazing impact of movement systems being interrupted by scars, as well as stored grief and things like that. So I'm having case study memories as I'm talking away, but this idea of, when pain pops up and doesn't go away and it's always on one side, can we have a conversation about, is there something that's meaningful to you that happened on that side of your body that is part of your story that you're either attached to or wanting to detach from, that will allow us to create more space and freedom in your movement? And then the cesarean scars in particular are really interesting, or scars because they often represent something being lost. So
Right.
it's this, someone's just spoke to a fellow this morning who's ripped his hamstring off his off his ischial tuberosity. So he'll now have to have a surgery, and his whole identity is being a very physical, capable person. So he'll have to. There'll be
Yep.
a lot of things he can't do anymore because of the type of surgery they'll have to apply. And then, the hip surgery that means that I can't run anymore, or what do we lose when we go through that processes, and those processes, and being able to actually reconnect and actually have movement patterns reintegrated into scars and
Hmm.
things like that, from like trapped feelings or trapped experiences that I didn't get to live out.
Yep.
And particularly with cesareans, unless they're elected, not unless, but potentially less likely if they're elected,
Hmm.
but women that might have gone in looking for a vaginal birth and have had to go to cesarean, and it's been a smart and safe option, but they're grieving the
Yeah.
experience that they didn't get to have, and being able to have physical contact with that scar, reintegrated into the body, and just let that grief come out, because often there's a heap of dysfunction around scars, from a musculoskeletal point of view, but also just physical spaces that people won't access, like it's a dark room, so they don't open it, or they keep it in the space where it was safe to move when
Yeah.
that surgery first happened, and then that scar just heals in the shape that they would have moved in anyway. So scars are interesting places that feel safe to go in our bodies, and what they've got to do with our stories, and can we reintroduce those movements, or is there something that has to, from an emotional level, let go first before we can kind of put ourselves physically into that space? So the dark room's a great analogy, because we can assess
Yeah.
someone's gait and go, this arm doesn't go here, or this hip doesn't go here. Is it a biomechanical chain reaction, or is there a reason why we can't move the hip to the right and really load it and take force through those sides?
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
interesting. I'm wondering if this conversation will heal the torn ligament that I have in my thumb right now. I'm hoping so.
That's a tricky one. How tricky? Yeah.
Damn
What?
football.
The hero's game.
Exactly. Thank you. I feel validated.
Out there being a hero. That's what the world thinks of us too. You hear people talking about Aussie rules. Like they don't wear helmets and they just hit each other and they play it on gravel. And the
um,
hero's game.
I'm curious to know as well. Like, I think in the space, and I speak mostly for myself, but and generally about conversations I've had with physios and different exercise physiologists. One of the big issues, and it's possibly worse than medication, is the level of compliance when people are given exercises and training regimes to go away to be able to heal their body, fix the injury, or to totally realign the way that they walk or the way that they hold themselves. What do you think is that? Is it just a matter of I'm super busy, this is a really unnatural thing for me to do, and so it goes by the wayside? Or do you feel that there's a deeper emotional limitation for that level of compliance? Because it might be do these 10 times a day, 3 times, 10 sets for 3 times a day or whatever it might be. And they get back and they're like, oh, yeah, I kind of thought about it, a couple of weeks later.
I think they're almost like the best conversations to be having, because like there's these magical fairy humans that actually feel motivated towards exercise, and it's not an issue for them. But it's a very small percentage of the population. And the thing that often motivates people to come and seek out help is pain. But that it's one of the highest motivators, I believe, highest motivator, and to avoid pain as well as public speaking. I think is the order of it. And I
Wow.
think death actually comes in under there somewhere. So for me, it's this idea that it's actually valuable when people come back and they haven't done their exercise, because we get to have a really meaningful conversation, but also that skill level to figure out at the start when you're meeting people is, are we here because we want to get this better? When we look at your whole life, what's the reality of you doing the thing that I've asked you to do? And if it's unrealistic, what's actually getting in the way, and having really meaningful conversations around that. So whether it's beliefs, whether it's, I've have trouble with my boundaries. I say yes to everything because my identity is so hung up with work. Something's not going to work if I'm not there. Like, where's the place where we want to be? And it kind of slides back to this idea about, to generalize it, because that's always helpful, is how rigid do we hold our values or beliefs, or how loosely? And it's usually one or the other. So I come to you and I say I'm committed to what I'm doing, but I'm really loose about it. I'm happy to, go off and do something else rather than say, no, I'm sorry, I need 20 minutes to do my exercise, versus I'm too rigid where I'm over in another environment and I'm not willing to say no to things, knowing that it only takes me 20 minutes. So ultimately, what are we doing to bullshit ourselves that when we stand in front of someone and say, I'd like your help with this, and then, when you come back however many weeks later and you haven't done it, that's the huge opportunity to kind of check in with, so not what got in the way, definitely, but when you came, what value was behind you coming, or have you ever checked in with that value, and then how you act around it, versus when you're being pulled away or hooked by something else that pulls you away. How does that land? How's that a workable behavior if you're saying that you don't want to be in pain anymore, or you want this to be better, and that you truly believe in the process as well? So I think they're great opportunities to check in with people's, a reality check, do a little bit of a life audit and go, okay, this is an exercise program, and it's in theory simple, but we've also got to get through these urges, sensations, feelings, thoughts, memories that will have you go, oh, I should do my exercise, but stop you from doing it at that choice point in time. Like, what's going on in the noggin that stops you makes you a bit of a liar because you came and said you want to get better.
I think as well, one of the tricks, and I find this with emotional eating and sugar and food and even people that have significantly life-threatening diseases that I've worked with, like, we're all challenged by this kind of stuff. And I think one of the things that needs to happen is we've got to be able to answer the question, how do I make somebody care about this in a context where it doesn't matter? And what I mean by that is when you're sitting in front of the therapist, or whether you're at the PT with the PT, that's possibly the time in the day where it matters 99%. Because I'm sitting here talking about it, but when I'm driving the kids to school, it doesn't matter at all. Do you know what I mean? Or when I'm sitting on the couch not thinking about it, doesn't matter at all. And so we've got to figure out how to enter the conversations where it perceptually doesn't seem to matter, and make it matter in all of those parts of the day, so that it's like, oh, it does have a compound effect of mattering, because my body is the common denominator in all those situations.
How do I do what matters? That's kind of it, isn't it? That's the whole
life advice with Matty and Anna.
Yeah. It's interesting too from a clinician's point of view as well, because you've got to have an ear for where this person is in their readiness to change as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important skill for someone to have. It's so easiest thing to do, prescribe an exercise, put someone in a box and go, this will work, and then, send them away. But if you haven't done that human version of it and checked in with how, are you actually here because you want to be here? What's motivating you? And, how do we tap into what matters? And I think most importantly, if I never see you again, but I give you something important that will slowly create change, and then, you end up seeing someone else, but that behavior piece has been influenced strongly, I don't mind if this is the only time that we talk, as long as that there's been, if I've met you where you're at and said the valid thing at that time, that's what we're after. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I remember when I started in the beginning, I was such a little activist. I was like, you've got to change. Oh my God. Like, it's just like, can't believe people eat this stuff. And, and I was just such an activist. And then I realized, I was like, oh, I'm pushing people away by, if they're not perfectly ready to respond to that level of insanity that I was putting out there. It's like
inspiring.
Yeah. Well, but then I realized that it's like, hang on, how many influences did it take, or presentations or exposures did it take me to get here? Going from like scientist working in a hospital, and I don't know, maybe it took me 100. And each time I built a little bit more belief that this made sense and a little bit more of like, oh, maybe this is the way to the promised land, you know?
Yeah.
And so once I really understood that about myself, I was like, oh, just what you're saying. It's like, if I'm just one exposure in the 100 exposures that they need to get there, then I've done my job, you know?
Yeah, it brings back the humanness to what we do rather than, outcomes, because outcomes are not predictable when we're talking about humans. Muscles are predictable, but not outcomes. That's
Not
why
the operators.
That's like studies go so well. Come here, do this, go away. Oh, it works.
Yeah.
Now you're in reality, and there seems to be a few curveballs.
Well,
Yeah.
I was going to say, speaking about that, the research study element, like how difficult is it to measure this emotional piece in the context of physiology and the way that people hold themselves? Like, what does the research space look like with that kind of area? Because it feels, I guess people listening might hear it as a bit fluffy, and a bit woo woo, the kind of stuff we're talking about. So, how does that show up in the literature?
Do you know? I don't feel strong in the literature with that. This is more the pracademic version
Yeah.
version of me. Like when you kind of dip over into you can go over to the psych version of it, right? So you can go over there and you can read in, actors acceptance and commitment therapy is helpful for this. And we see brain changes here. And like, for example, in perimenopause, for example, they look at hot flushes and they look at mindfulness, and that we can change the intensity and the frequency of hot flushes by someone just practicing mindfulness.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the inside out or the outside in version. So I'm not sure how much it's been crossed over. I'm sure it'd be a European version study. Like don't, like that's what I love the most about learning with Robert Schlepp, the fascial fellow, is that he would use words in anatomy explanations that didn't exist in Australia, and they were often movement or connection-based things.
Yeah.
So I think that, if the research is there and pinning down, I feel motivated now. I'm adding it to my list, that it would be in that very European style of conversations with body in the way we do research over there. I think there's still that very much that separation of ideas into muscles versus this versus that in the research space. And then we can go to exercise and we can look at what exercise benefits, that same topic of hot flushes, and we see benefits there as well. But it's not to say one's the right thing to do and one's not. It's that there's going to be a commonality in there, and that these two things are influencing that one common thing in a particular way, which in theory is, experience of how do we feel about how we're feeling, and regulating breathing, probably vagal nerve based stuff, to be honest. So I don't know if that hasn't answered your question at all, but I don't feel across the, particular studies that look at posture and emotion and how it manifests. I'm going to go and look though. I'm going to go and look.
Well, I think I've done very much the same thing with emotion, sort of getting to a place where working on emotional binge, overeating, relationship with food, is that it's, I went on my own sort of mental health trauma journey and learned a heap of stuff there and read a heap of psychology textbooks trying to figure myself out, and then understanding the people around me as well with that information. Then the medical, sort of science, nutrition information, and being like, oh, I can see how these go together.
Mash.
And that's like the pracademic thing you said before. It's like sort of a bit of academia from over here and a bit of academia from over here, and then put it together in practice. And when you're sitting in front of humans, you can't miss the human element, which is this fluctuating variable of all sorts of different experiences and ideas and thoughts and words and expressions, and it doesn't fit into a category, and you've got to work with what's in front of you, which doesn't necessarily just slot into, oh, this study says this, so this is the answer.
Yeah, and that's a common term in allied health worlds, and it's like research to practice. I think it should be the other way around. practice to research, and because that's ultimately where it all comes from. We start seeing this on repeat, and then that's where the research comes. But we always talk about it, research to practice, and you're like, okay,
yeah,
the other way around.
Well, that's kind of what I like about the history of things like Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine. And I know that those things were very much developed well before ethics and morals were, at the standard they are today. So there's a lot of things that we can't do because we're putting people at risk, with unknown outcomes. But it makes a lot more sense if we just started collecting anecdotes, and that was the method of being like, oh, clearly this is a topic we need to research because there's doctors all over the world, or exercise physiologists all over the world that are saying, oh, we keep seeing this, or we've seen this the whole time and nobody's ever studied it.
Yeah, I love Norman Deutsch said, if you show me one pig that can fly, don't ask for two.
That's good. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, it's something like that. You can go. I hope you can Google it, but he said it in a talk, but I'm sure it's the exact is Googleable. Love the internet. Yeah.
So where can everybody find you and all your stuff and get more of you on the interwebs?
More of me. My website is UNNA Movement, so unnamovement.com, and on there you'll find masterclasses and things like that. Got a beautiful program coming out with a nutrition-based person, Cheryl Carroll, who we've created a program to hopefully support anyone going through perimenopause. That's called Shapeshifters, and that's coming out. We're released in the middle of June after lots of hard work.
How exciting.
Yeah, and, contact for speaking and all that kind of stuff can come through my website.
Yep.
And then our friend Instagram, I think I'm unna.movement. And then Facebook, if that's your version, is just UNNA Movement, but it's the same content. So just pick your platform.
Yep. Wonderful.
Yeah, so that's me and where to look. So if people are interested in chatting, it's always nice to hear how people are going, what resonates. And as we spoke about this at the start, Matty, like, we've got these amazing networks. Like, something might resonate, but you never work with me, but there's a question and you're like, oh my God, go and talk to this person. They've got everything you need. And it's really feels thorough being able to be that person where you're almost like a triage person. I might not be your person, but something I've said, might unlock something that, you just need help redirecting where to get that input from, especially now that we're in front of people, right? We can get face to face now.
Oh, how refreshing is getting face to face again.
Yeah. Let me feel where those bones are.
Yeah, well, I'll put all of those links in the show notes below so that everybody can come and get your stuff. And surely there'll be plenty because you have a very calm, grounded presence, which is really relaxing to communicate with and be around. So I appreciate you being here. And for anybody that's enjoyed this episode or you think somebody needs to hear it, give it a share, send it over, blame me for any tricky conversations that come up. That's totally fine. And before we wrap up, what is one piece of health information that you wish more people knew about?
I think the key to consistency in your health is self-awareness. Meet yourself where you're at, get some, you keep doing the same things over and over. That's not by chance. That's the stuff you should be focusing on. And it's often not a written program. It's not getting, a gym membership or something like that. It's getting to know yourself so you can figure out what matters. And that really does lead to health.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure, Matty. I really loved it.
Yeah, we'll have to get you on again soon.
Yeah, talk all the things.
Absolutely. All right, we'll catch you soon though.
Thanks, Matty.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.